to start with the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance
to the
to the
flag
flag
of
of
the
the
United
States of America,
America,
and to the
and
republic
to the republic
for which it
stands
stands,
one
one
nation,
nation, under
under
God,
God, indivisible,
indivisible,
with
with
liberty
liberty
and justice
for all.
for all.
Thank you. Arlene, can you do a roll call, please?
Sure. John Aldred,
Here.
Francis Bach,
Here.
Ben Dollinger, Rick Drew,
Here.
Tim Garneau,
Present.
Jim Grimes,
Here.
Mike Martinson, Susan McGraw-Keeber,
Here.
and Bill Taylor.
Here.
Great. So if anyone sees those two guys show up, Ben and Mike Martinson, we'll keep our eye out. Thank you.
Thank you, Arlene.
Thank you, Arlene.
All right, let's start with the,
Francis, I need to actually
Yes.
interrupt you really quick. You actually have somebody on the line already,
okay.
and I didn't even put on the phone number yet.
Okay.
From the number one.
Let's see, we're going to start with the public portion, but I'm going to go with Madeline first. Madeline, are you on?
I'm on. Can you hear
How
me?
are you? Yes.
I am well. Thank you very much. So I just wanted to start by letting you know that the applicants want to thank the trustees very much for your approval last week so that they can at least start the repair of the bulkhead. Thank you for that permit. And also just to say that in reference to the dock, and we know that tonight will probably be discussion and some questions, the applicants also wanted just to put forth to begin that they understand that there would be some concern about public access, that they are concerned as well, but only in the regard that they really want the trustees to know that they are very committed to keeping the access available to the public in that area in and around where they hope to be able to construct their dock so that there wouldn't be any interruption for people who want to go shellfishing, want to get oysters, and that there would be plenty of room for navigation between pilings. So I know that you've all had these plans for a while, but just as a quick review, the three parts of this dock, as shown in the plans, the floating dock is 4 feet wide, 24 feet long. The catwalk is 4 feet wide and 40 feet long. And the aluminum ramp is 3 feet wide and 20 feet long. And so the way it is going to be put together, the ramp rests on the floating dock. There'll be an overlap of about 4 feet. And the wheels on the ramp will, of course, allow it to move with the tides. I know that you've all received the dock construction protocol from Castello Marine. One thing that I did mention in an email to several of you today that did not make it onto that protocol was just that Castello Marine does actually own a turbidity curtain, so that if there are concerns about the sediment and controlling the sediment during construction, that will be controlled and contained during the construction.
Yeah, I'm not sure why they hadn't put it in the original protocol, but we absolutely, urge them to use that, of course, to contain sediment, during the construction of the dock, because that's, of course, an issue.
Yeah, but hey, Tyler,
Hey, Jim.
the language in your DEC permits probably describe the sediment curtain in there.
Yeah, they do. The DEC wants to see that as well. So yeah, that is.
So I mean, typically what we would be asking for is something in line with that. I'm going to assume that the ZBA, when you go before them, are going to ask the very same thing.
Of
I'm
course.
sure. Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah, it's definitely important.
Yeah, so at this point, I guess we know that at least 4 of you have been out to the site, and that there might be some questions or concerns that we can address this evening, because we're certainly open if there are any adjustments that the trustees would like to see with the design or location or what have you.
Well, it seemed like the design of this dock pretty much mirrored the old Levinson property dock, which was built by Costello some years ago. It looks like the exact same dock. So in terms of projection into the harbor, it appears that we're looking at about the same situation, correct?
Pretty much. It looks like the existing pilings that are down there on what I guess is now the Martyr property, which was Levinson, come out even further into the water. From my measurements, it's over 100 feet out that some of those last pilings are at. So I think we might be a little shorter than that. But yeah, otherwise it seems like it's the same kind of type of dock, and Costello, doing the work that they do, probably very similar. Yeah.
We certainly won't be any longer than the Martyr Dock.
Yeah, right.
There was a comment made before about navigational room between pilings. Can you explain that to me?
I think Maddie just meant that people would be able to oyster and shellfish between, under the dock, around the dock, and also navigate around the dock because the dock doesn't go far out enough to interfere with navigation, and it doesn't go further out than other nearby coastal structures do.
Thanks, Tyler.
Right, that was what you meant, Maddie?
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
Exactly.
You were addressing both the public access for shellfishing concern and the navigation concerns.
How many pilings are going to be put into the bottom?
Looks like a total of 16 from the plans that Drew made here. So, they're paired.
8 on each side.
Yeah, it's 5 for the catwalk though. The other ones are kind of freestanding pilings out there. Although, no, you know what? I'm sorry. I think they aren't paired necessarily once you're out there. So I think there are only 3, I believe. I know it's actually a bit unclear on Drew's plan because it's a side elevation. So you're just seeing the pilings on one side are behind the pilings on the other side from the way you're looking at the site plan.
So how many are there total? Or we don't know at this time?
It's 16 or less.
Yeah, you're seeing the side view, so you've got 8 and then another 8 behind them.
Right, there's the view, yeah. So there's 10
Thanks,
on definitely 10 for the catwalk because those are paired. And then there are these 3 here. So I will double check whether or not the 3 that the dock sits with are actually paired or not.
Well, these are on the floating dock.
On the floating dock. Yeah, they're just they're not really dolphins, but they're kind of like dolphins. They just in the winter months, that would all be pulled in. So you just have I think it's 3 or 4 pilings that would be out there with no dock.
I think it's 6 pilings. I think there's 3 on each side of the floats.
I have to say it is a little unclear on Drew's plan there.
Well, I think you're just looking at one side. It mirrors
right.
What's on the other side.
Yeah. But when I talked to Costello, she was saying that they would design it in a way where she mentioned 3 pilings that would hold the dock in place. So
yeah, they might. Hey guys, that's a floater. So that may not have pilings on the other side. It may be cleated off so you can basically pull your boat up next to it.
Right. You kind of tie the floating dock up to the pilings. You don't need 6 out there to do that. So I honestly think it's probably 13. And sorry, I looked at this beforehand so I would know this. And I know that there are 10 on the catwalk, and I believe it's 3 out there by the dock. But that'll be something I can double check with Drew and with Costello.
I just for some background, I took a look at the aerials of the harbor, and I just wanted to kind of give the board a sense of what's out there now in the harbor. And I'm talking about the main part of the harbor, the open water. So basically what would be north of the prohibited area, which goes basically from Will Curl Highway across to about a little north of Oyster Pond on the west side of the harbor. So north of that, And then south of the commercial dock, there are 10 docks in the harbor. On the west side, there's nothing from Sammy's Beach all the way around to just north of Hands Creek. North of Hands Creek, there's a cluster of 4 docks that range in length from about 47 feet to about 142 feet. And south of Hands Creek, there's the Duke Dock, or the Boys Harbor Dock. That's about 145-foot dock. And then south of that, a little bit north of Oyster Pond, maybe halfway between the Duke Dock and Oyster Pond, there's about an 80-foot dock.
Mm-hmm.
That's it for the west side. Then on the east side, starting from the commercial dock and heading south, first dock is basically the old Helms boat basin. That extends out from the shore about 65 feet. And that consists of one straight dock and then one L-shaped dock, and that forms a basin. South of that is, the next one south of that is the Martyr Dock. These are just private docks, not including commercial stuff. That's about 100 feet, or maybe a little more than 100 feet, as Tyler said. South of that, there's a dock south of Shagwong Marina, a short dock, about 27 feet, based on my measurements. And then south of that, there's about 132-foot dock. I believe that's the Harlan Dock.
Yeah.
And between that 27-foot dock and the Harlan Dock, there's a stretch of continuous bulkhead along, I don't know, 4 or 5 or 6 properties that looks like it doesn't have docks, but it looks like it has kind of landings off the bulkheads. They extend out. I don't know if they touch the bottom. They look like they're stairs. There's 5 of those. So that constitutes the structures that are in the harbor, in the open part of the harbor, north of the prohibited area and south of the commercial dock.
John, if you'd like, I can share my screen. I have the Suffolk GIS up, which has all of the aerial data, so people can have a visual of a little bit of what you're saying.
That'd be great. Let's see it.
Okay. Is that showing up?
Not yet.
It will.
There we go.
Hello?
It's here. Hey guys, it's Ben. I don't know.
Is that up?
Yep.
Yep.
It is. Thank you.
All right. So that's the McGinn property right here. And then, as John was saying, north, you have East Hampton Point up here and Duck Creek Marina. So it appears that the East Hampton Point dock structure that John mentioned that forms this basin here comes out fairly far, a good 150 feet. And then we have where McGinn's dock would be proposed. And I don't know if you can see the measurements I'm putting up, but we'd be coming out about 80 feet, which would be something like that. And Charlie Martyr's dock comes out maybe 110 feet here. And then south of that, you do have shallower water, which you can even tell from the aerial because it's pretty light there. Then you have Shagwong, and you have these structures John was talking about that kind of come out on this bulkheaded stretch here. And those properties are much narrower and a little more dense down there. And then it's pretty shallow down here, but you do have this nice long dock structure, which probably had to be that long to come out and reach a proper depth there. So that's looking like 150 feet, 160 feet. So that's, sorry, I don't want to redo what John just did, but that's kind of the overview of the east side where we are.
I'd just like to mention, one of my concerns is oysters in the area. That bottom is it's a hard, relatively hard, sandy, pebbly bottom. That's good for oysters. The Shellfish hatchery has seeded oysters south of the East Hampton Point docks, kind of between the Hampton Point docks and the Martyr Dock since 2010. It's seeded every year except 2011.
Hey, John, how close do they plant them to shore?
They probably go from a little bit beyond the low tide mark, and they probably go out to, where the water starts to seem as though it's getting deeper, based on what they're seeing as they're seeding.
Mm-hmm.
Which probably is, it's fairly shallow in that area, so they could be going out as much as 200 or 300 feet, but they probably aren't. They're probably keeping it in more or less. If you see the East Hampton Point dock, which extends out, what was that, a couple hundred feet, 250, is that?
Yeah, 150 or 160.
150?
Yeah.
It's probably about that far out, as far out as they go, I would think.
Hmm.
I know when I did it, we did it, 2010 was my last year of seeding, and that's about what the extent offshore that we would have gone. And the advantage of this area for seeding oysters is this is primarily one of those spots that we looked at, and I'm sure they still look at, as basically available to commercial shell fishermen, because you need a boat to get there. There's no easy access from land. So a lot of our seeding, we look for the hatchery seedings, they look for places that are easily accessible so that, people can easily get to the shellfish beds.
Mm-hmm.
But there are certain areas that the advantage is that it's not easily accessible, and therefore would be something that commercial shellfish harvesters can take advantage of. And this is kind of one of those places.
Yeah, it's a nice hard bottom for oysters to live on, and it seems like it's a productive area. So, it seems as though you could certainly get any kind of smaller craft, between where this dock would be and where Charlie Martyr's dock is. And you could definitely get smaller craft in toward the shore between here and the East Hampton Point dock structures. So I don't particularly see any way that it materially inconveniences any commercial shellfish harvesting. But if anyone else does, we're welcome to open solutions that might minimize that to the greatest extent possible.
Is there any data to support how dock installations impact shellfish in the area? I mean, oysters are going to be laying on this bottomland, and you're going to be driving these pilings in, so there's definitely going to be an impact, I would think, at least to the footprint of the dock. John, are you aware of any research being available on this type of construction on bottomland and shellfish growing activities?
Not directly. But if I were to be asked that question, my response would be, clearly in the immediate vicinity of the piles and in the pile driving process, it wouldn't be a good fit for an oyster's life necessarily. But my greater concern would be twofold, I think. One would be the use of the dock. I mean, this is in 3.5 feet of water. So it's relatively shallow. And the boat or the boats that would access this dock would, their propellers would be relatively close to the bottom. They'd be a constant disturbance of the bottom as the boats were coming and going, as with any dock in relatively shallow water. My other concern would be that, sure, oysters can live in the vicinity of this dock and technically can be harvested. It's public bottom. But I'm sure there's an inhibition factor around docks where the perception is, you know, this is some guy's dock. I'm not going to necessarily, you know, I'm going to stay away from it. That's my opinion. So.
And hopefully I would assume the commercial, if it's only real commercial guys that are coming in there, they're well aware that it's trustee bottomland and that it's totally public. So I do see what you mean about that, you know, psychological sort of inhibition factor. But I think anybody going there knows that they're allowed to harvest there, whether or not there's a dock there. And, you know, I've talked to the owner about this, and he's very supportive of shell fishing and very open to letting anybody who, you know, if he saw somebody oystering by his dock, he's not going to go down there and chase him off. You know, he's definitely.
Hey, Tyler. Hey, Tyler.
Sure, Eric.
You know, what about the idea of, you know, some type of remediation where if the bottom land there was surveyed and maybe, you know, if we found a lot of oysters there, they could be temporarily moved until construction is done. Maybe, you know, putting back or some fresh seeding there that was, you know, contributed to maybe by the owner to make sure that shell fishing is strong and healthy there. And, you know, you kind of make it better than it was when you started, so to speak. I don't know if that's a path forward or something, but, you know, I just thought I'd throw it out there.
Okay. If that's a possibility, I mean, I'm sure that's something that John McGann would be open to because he, you know, he really is a big environmentalist and he wants to make sure he doesn't do any harm with this.
So how would
maybe,
something like that be measured?
I guess field collection, diving in the area, some photography. It doesn't have to be a big project, but, you know, someone who's proficient in the water could probably, you know, do a pretty good write-up on something like that. And or you could just set some goals to say, when the project's done, we want to see, you know, a seeding project take place. And, you know, you could do it maybe more proactively.
Yeah, well, I know that John McGinn would be very open to whatever would be the best for the bottomland there and for the environment. So can I ask how the other board members would feel if that is something that we proposed with the application?
I'd actually like to take that question a step farther and ask the applicant if they've considered other means of keeping their boat. The trustees aren't necessarily in our any decision we make, in my understanding, we're not bound by the town code necessarily, because it's, you know, we own the bottom and trust for the public, and our decision is final as to what we do and don't allow on our lands. But the town code under the dock section does have a qualifier that you'll be facing with the ZBA, actually, which asks if there are alternatives to a dock, such as rope and pulley moorings, moorings in other parts of the harbor. I mean, you are right off the mooring area there. So I'd like to hear what the applicant has to say about that alternative, not keeping his boat on the dock necessarily, but keeping it on a mooring.
Well, also the mooring area is across the channel, so it's not that easy to access. Hey, Tyler, I have a quick question. This is Ben. John mentioned something about 3.5 feet. I thought, wasn't the dock moved to an area where there's deeper water? And how deep is the water at the end of the dock? Talk about that a little bit.
3.5 feet.
Oh, okay. That's it?
Actually, I've got the survey. I can put it up, Tyler, if you want.
Sure.
So that depth of water is probably going to constrain the size of the boat that can go there without causing damage, particularly on big tide swings. I'm just trying to figure out what type of vessel usage would be appropriate in that area. Tyler, do you have any information about the types of boats the homeowner is interested in docking there?
Tyler, unmute.
Have we lost Tyler?
There you go. Nope, I was muted, sorry. I believe it's a sailboat that he wants there. So I probably have a small upward motor to get around when there's not wind, but I know he doesn't want any kind of very large craft.
Right. Well, yeah, just for the sailboat, is it going to be a retractable keel?
I would assume it would have to be.
Yeah, because it's pretty shallow. Yeah, you don't want to obviously have the keel.
Well, yeah, damage the boat. And
yeah, of course.
Like not a great fit.
Yeah, so that's something that we'll talk to him again about exactly what kind of boat it is. I realize I don't have that info on hand, though I remember having a discussion with him about that because that was one of my concerns was, what are you docking here exactly? I know it wasn't anything large, but let me get back to you on that piece of info. As far as
Sounds
Ben,
good.
as far as
Thank you.
yeah, no, of course, that's a really important consideration. Yeah, the depth is about 4 feet in this area. It's about 3.5 just north of the dock and 4 just south of the dock.
Okay. Not too deep.
Yeah, that's why it's hard to have. That's why it's the length that it is, to reach the required depths.
Mhm.
Tyler, can you zoom that in at all to the vicinity of the dock?
Sure.
That end of the dock is right on the 3.5-foot contour line.
Yes. Yeah.
And that, if you look to the offshore of that contour line continues out.
Yeah, it's almost flat.
The next line is also the 3.5-foot contour line. So it's 3.5 feet for another, well, I guess probably another 40 feet or so, 20, 30 or 40 feet beyond the end of the dock.
Right.
And I don't know if this shows it, but I believe as you go seaward, I believe it gets shallower again. I don't know if you can move that over. Does that have those maybe it does.
Yeah, it gets deeper as you go out here. You get to 4 and 4.5 feet, but yes, absolutely, you're right. It does go back. It's about 3.5 feet, a good 40 or so feet after the end of the dock, seaward of the end of the dock, and then you have 4.5 and 4. There's a bit of a little sandbar, it seems like, just south of this area where it's about 3 feet, but there's also a bit of a deep area here that's 4 feet or more, just south of the dock. So, I'll admit that there could be room to maybe adjust the location of the dock a little bit to reach even better depths. It reaches the requisite depth here, which was something we corrected with the DEC before they gave us their approval. They wanted to see, the 3 feet of depth. So we positioned it so it would have 3.5.
I think this meets the requirement. Well, it certainly meets the DEC requirements because you got the permit, but I think it also meets the minimum town standard.
Yeah.
I think the minimum town standard is 80 feet maximum, and you have to reach 3 feet
3
of
feet.
water.
Well, I would mention that given this area is predominantly shallow, the impact on the like oyster grow out areas is somewhat diminished as a consequence. It looks like you've got a significant area here that would support oysters beyond that immediate shoreline area.
I'd like to just bring up one other thing that crossed my mind anyway, and I think it's something that as a board we should consider. There's been a prohibition on docks in every replaced except this part of this part of 3 Mile Harbor since 1987, I think, was the last piece of that puzzle. And I don't believe there's been any dock built in this area of the harbor and in this part, this open area of the harbor since then. And I wonder if allowing this dock would set a precedent for the future, given the concerns that I have. Anyway, this is me talking.
So,
Hey, John, do you know why this area was excluded from the prohibition?
No, I don't.
If I were to venture to guess, I mean, I would say that the other areas, docks would impose on navigation more than they would here, because here the 3 Mile Harbor is so large and wide, and there are so many existing docks in this area. You know, you have these major marinas here that are major commercial marinas. So that to me was when I read the prohibitions that were placed in the past over like Accabonac Harbor. That made a lot of sense to me because Accabonac has a lot more sort of narrow tributaries and shallower areas and pretty much no commercial docks. So whereas 3 Mile Harbor does have a lot of that activity and is much more navigable and wider. So that was my assumption of why this area was excluded, because the only part of 3 Mile Harbor that is excluded is south of Wilkesboro, like John said, which is, shallow, probably too shallow to begin with to get to the depths required nowadays by the DC and the town.
John, I just wanted to add to your point in terms of being concerned about precedent, which I definitely understand. One of the things we might want to be able to come back to the board with is the numbers, as far as the concern that this is the start of a death by 1,000 cuts. You let this one in, and how many other property owners are going to want to do the same thing? I don't know the numbers exactly, but it wouldn't appear from what we've looked at that there are actually very many properties at all left in this very, very small area that does continue by your own rules to be able to allow for the construction of docks. I don't think there are too many other properties that would be able to apply. But that's just something I'm suggesting that we could check out so that we could come back to you and actually let the board know.
You mean in the whole open area of the harbor, the whole area of the harbor that's allowable to docks currently?
Yes. Because I appreciate what you're saying, and I'm sure the board members do, I think a bit of research on our part to figure out, not that obviously we can get every property surveyed to look at their water depths to see if it's possible, but just to see how many properties there are.
I've definitely looked into it a bit, and I know, we have looked at that. We wanted to produce sort of an exact number, but yeah, like Maddie said, the depth is one thing that sort of clouds the question a bit. But obviously north of this area, you get to that toward the channel. So things up there would impede navigation. So that's probably not an optimal area. So between the East Hampton Point Marina and Shagwong Marina seems to be the most reasonable area of the eastern side of 3 Mile Harbor to have docks at all. And in there are only 9 properties between Shagwong and East Hampton Point, 2 of which are owned by John McGinn. These 2, they recently purchased the property just north of them from their neighbor, from Greg Blatt. So, and that one's not bulkheaded either, and maybe it would be awkward to build a dock there. But anyway, 2 out of the 9 properties between these two marinas are owned by John McGinn. So, and then one has a dock. It's Charlie Martyr's property. The other ones are very narrow. And then as you get south of Shagwong, it's a lot of little narrow properties that have that bulkhead walkway structure that already have access to the water. So I can't imagine people there would propose docks because they already have access to the water from that bulkheaded walkway. And as you get further south of there, you have the long dock on the Herland property. And south of that, it does appear to get pretty shallow. So I think at least on the east side, you're pretty much looking at where you can get good depths and you have no existing water access coastal structures. You have about 9 properties, 2 of which already have docks, and 1 of which wouldn't get a dock if Mr. McGinn got his because he would use that dock for both properties.
Well,
I think to say that, Tyler, you need to know the water depths.
yeah, hey, you can't predict the future here in terms of, it's presently in the McGinn ownership. But, the difference between the Blatt property, and I think it was Osborne before it was Blatt, is it's one of the few properties over there that does not have a bulkhead. Okay, they actually have kind of a bit of a beach there.
Yeah,
it doesn't really lend itself to a dock, but you know what? That doesn't say that some future owner might not want to follow suit. Do you think your client would be willing to put a covenant on that property that prohibits any future owners from putting a dock in?
Let's talk to him about that.
It's a pretty long read. It's a pretty long read. If I was the owner, I would consider that very carefully before I agreed to it. Yeah. But that may be a very effective way of mitigating the impacts here simply by sterilizing the lot to the north.
Can one do that?
Anybody
do that legally?
Yes, you can do it, but I would assume, Chris, you should jump in here to correct me. You can do pretty much anything under your own volition.
You can tie a future owner?
You can put a covenant.
Yeah, because it's a covenant and restriction that's going to run with the land.
Yeah,
that's correct.
And it runs through any successive owner?
Correct.
The successor of that owner and the successor of
In
that
perpetuity.
Correct. It's just like an easement, utility easement on a property. It runs in perpetuity. Yep.
Okay.
It would burden the property in the future for future buyers. So that is obviously a careful thing to consider. Yeah.
Hey guys, I'm not throwing that out there I just want to clarify that. I'm not throwing that out there as a condition to permitting this thing. But Maddie, you asked, and Tyler, you asked earlier if there was something that perhaps the owner could do to mitigate the impacts here that would perhaps direct this board in a more favorable manner.
I know he's very open to doing things, to help mitigate any concerns people have about this proposal. So we'll definitely ask him about that. Yeah.
I was noticing that all the structures that are there now have been there for a very long time. So those structures were all in existence when the prior boards of trustees decided not to put a prohibition on that part of the harbor. It's, so whenever they put the prohibition on, they didn't see a reason to include this area.
However, the areas they did put prohibitions on contained docks and bulkheads.
Okay, but to kind of put the history of these properties into context, the only reason you don't see a pre-existing dock on this McGinn property is because the McGinn property, the Levinson property, and the property immediately to the south were all in one owner. Okay, so he put the dock where he felt he only needed one dock on one of those properties. But I think you could have been sure that if all of these properties were in single separate ownership back in the 80s, you probably
I don't think so, Jim.
You probably would have had applications in on all of them.
I don't think so.
Why is that?
I mean, this house was owned by, I'm not sure of the name, but this is a long-term ownership of this house by an old East Hampton family.
This was Bud Levinson's house. and he bought it. I'm trying to think of who he bought it from, but he probably owned it for 40 years.
I'm not sure about that.
Okay. I know he owned it for a good while.
I know when we met out here the first time with the other attorney, Mr. Filer, he gave me the history of this house, and it wasn't Levinson. That
I think it was original. Might have been originally Osborne. One of the Osborne.
That sounds familiar. I've had a conversation with John McGinn about the previous.
And just so you know, Blatt's property was Osborne property, I believe, as well.
Excuse me, I'm just going to jump in. If you move the survey, I think it'll show you formerly owned by, and I think, Jim, you're right, it says Osborne. If you can move the survey.
Move it.
Moving it.
There you go.
And then go up, bring it up, and it will say here, E. Monroe, Ethel Osborne. I don't know if that's what you were referring to.
Yeah, that's the Blatt property, but Susan, I think this house was an Osborne property as well. They both took access off the same driveway.
Okay.
I do know those two properties used to be part of the same lot at one point, and they were subdivided.
Okay, so that answers the question.
That would make sense. You can just see from the shape of the lines that they were probably this was all one parcel at some point. I have the history of the ownership somewhere. I just don't have it handy.
I don't know. Hey, do we want to table, can I make a suggestion that we table this? And Maddie and Tyler, you're going to look into the potential number of docks that could go in this area. And,
let me, Jim, just also run through to make sure I've noted everyone's concerns as far as information that we should bring back to the board. The first point was just that we'll get a precise number and location of the pilings. And then to John's concern, as far as talking with our clients about the applicants about what other alternatives were considered prior to coming to the place of doing the dock application. We'll find out exactly what kind of boat they are interested in keeping there. And then look into also the possibility of having them file as mitigation for future development, doing the covenants and restrictions that would prohibit the building of a dock on the other property. Am I missing anything that anyone brought up for us to bring back?
The one thing I took
looking into some shellfish mitigation.
Yes.
Yes.
The other one.
Okay.
Yeah, it would be nice to see if we can get a survey of existing shellfish there, so that in the future it can be
feeding activities, background.
Yeah.
Okay.
Maddie, I would ask about the Blatt property. Was that just recently sold? Is there a new owner there?
Yeah, it's McGinn.
Yes.
Yeah, about 2014.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, McGinn bought the Blatt property. Maddie, I think he's talking about the Gregory Blatt's property to the north.
Oh,
it still says Greg Blatt on the tax map, but if it was, I think, just last year or even this spring that John McGinn bought that property. So.
Oh, okay. The neighboring. Sorry.
Updated yet.
So, Maddie, just to be clear, just so I'm clear, you're proposing to give us the number of properties without docks that could potentially have docks?
I think we'll do our best to give some kind of an overview. I don't know that I want to promise a specific number, only because if for some reason we can't do that because we're not informed enough about water depth, we don't want to offer something that's going to be a false narrative, but that we will come back to you to address specifically and hopefully with some kind of a number, your point of being concerned about precedent, because I think that's a really good point that we need to be able to address as a concern.
Maddie and Tyler, is it possible to use a drone to explore what John is asking about? Is a drone helpful?
I don't think so, because you can't get an accurate read of the water depths. Maybe you'd get a better image of how shallow or deep it is than the aerials give you, but it's kind of the same sort of qualitative info that you see on the aerials, where you can say, oh, this is lighter colored, so it's probably shallower, but you really don't know. Like Jim and John were saying, you really don't know exactly what the depths are. You're just kind of extrapolating.
So what I'm thinking we're going to get is the number of properties without docks.
Yeah, within the not prohibited area of 3 Mile Harbor, just how many properties are private and don't have a dock currently?
Okay.
We can do that. It's, I'm sure all those properties wouldn't be eligible for a dock, if they're considered.
Right. But you would have no way of knowing which were and which weren't, unless you surveyed the bottom of the harbor.
Right. Okay.
Well, thanks for spending
Anybody
all
else?
the time explaining this.
Yeah, no, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay,
And
thank
if
you,
anyone
guys.
comes up with additional concerns or questions or requests, please reach out to us at the office at Wayland Filer Landmarks, and we'd be happy to look into whatever it is.
Thanks, Maggie.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thanks.
Hey, trustees, before we move on, just a question for you or for Arlene. Do we have access to the file and the resolution that prohibited the docks in other areas, so we could take a look at previous board's intent here?
Sure.
And kind of look at that?
We can
What do we have,
email
Arlene?
that out to all of you, and we've been sending it around to the different agents, so
Okay.
they've been receiving it. More things are coming up in the book even before 84. There was just a lot of talk about docks in general, how they might affect it. So every day in the office, I'm kind of finding something that contributes to the thinking in general, to those resolutions.
Yeah, that's great. Thanks, Arlene. I think it's important we take a look at the intent of the past boards and use that as we start to think about a framework for the rest of the areas of 3 Mile Harbor and this particular area as well. So it could be really valuable stuff.
Yeah, Chris, I agree. And we did submit, when we initially made the application, we did find the preliminary resolutions on that topic, which we submitted as part of the original application. So that will be in our file at the office.
Okay, great.
But I know Arlene has been doing a lot of digging, so I'm sure there's more.
Yes, thank you, Arlene.
You're welcome.
I've got some of that information as well from Arlene and Lori over the years. I think from the motions and resolutions themselves, there won't be any great gleaning of background intent, but there are some minutes that I've seen that give a little bit further understanding of the trustees' thinking. And I think to get a real complete picture, there might have to be some more investigation of minutes surrounding those meetings.
Okay. And then it seems like, I know you've discussed setting the precedent, but from a broader perspective, you guys, I think we have to start to really entertain the idea that an approval here could result in 8 or 9 additional docks, as you've been discussing. So it's important we do a little bigger dive and keep discussing these implications.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right.
I'm going to stick around for Scott's thing.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
Bye-bye.
Hey, Francis,
Hi,
just to
May.
let you know, Francis,
Yes.
you still have a call on hold.
Okay. We're going to go to Scott first. He was here before the meeting even started, so let him get part of his evening back anyway. So, Scott, you're looking for an extension of your permit for the Bionic Duck Blind?
Yes. Yep. That's why I'm here. Yeah, I'm hoping for at least a week. I think 2 weeks would be even better. To put a date on it, I think I said November 7th.
November 8th.
8th. Yeah.
I'd like to make a motion that we extend Scott's duck blind permit till November 8th.
I will second
Yeah.
that.
I just think that what is November 8th? Is that our next meeting?
Sunday. It's a Sunday.
I'd like to extend this to the day after our next meeting. So that if this happens again, if there's another extension, if Scott has continued interest, which I hope he does, we can just, at the next meeting, simply extend it again without having to worry about a day here, a day there.
Okay.
Sounds good.
Yeah, that'd be
All
great.
right. I'll second the modification of that motion.
We have all in favor?
Aye.
Scott, do you have your letter that you wrote about your project that you'd like to share with the public because it will not be in the papers?
Oh, yeah, my letter to the, yes. Sure, I'd like to read it. Let me bring it up real quick.
This way the public can hear it.
Yeah.
For those who don't know what happened.
Okay. Okay, I'd like to just read it. Yeah, maybe so it's on the record. This is a letter to the Star, which I'm not sure if they are going to publish or not, but I created the Bionic Blind as a monument to Bionic culture. It is a floating micro home that takes the form of a familiar duck blind, save for a giant dome window that creates a stunning view over its temporary location in Accabonac Harbor. I built this floating installation for the Parish Art Museum's Roadshow exhibition and have invited the public to view it inside and out by appointment to raise awareness about the local people who are fishermen, baymen, hunters, and farmers, as well as about the environment itself. I've enjoyed being out there and have received enthusiastic visits from all sides of the community. Recently, however, I was extremely disappointed by some minor, though threatening, acts of vandalism. My permit was removed, several panels of plexiglass broken, dead fish, squid, and bait thrown in, and most of all, a homemade tire flattening device was planted in the parking lot where the installation is being visited. I understand everyone is a critic and some may not want this kind of attention for themselves or for a beautiful location on Landing Lane in Springs. But I have to say that this kind of anti-art behavior really sucks. I am not a Bonnicker by birth or trade, but I don't claim to be, though I have lived here my entire life, and I have a deep appreciation of the culture and history and want to make others aware of it. Those are what my intentions were in creating this installation, and hope that that is what shines through. I don't find it to be exclusionary, elitism, or appropriation, and I'm certainly not making any money on it. By the time the public reads this, the Bionic Blind may be removed and on to its next exhibition. But in the brief period I was graciously permitted by the town and the trustees to display this art, I'd extend my thanks to those that have visited and learned about the history, traditions, and environment of this unique place we all call home. Signed, Scott Bluedorn. So,
Very good.
Yeah,
thank you again.
For those of you who have not had the opportunity to see it, I'd like to say that it's a wonderful exhibit, and Scott is uniquely talented, and this is an innovative and wonderful project. So you have to call to make an appointment, and if you want to give your email address, Scott, people can sign up. Email.
Yep. So my email is Scott Bluedorn. Last name is Bluedorn. And that's at gmail.com. And you can email me to make an appointment and I can meet you. Although I'm really kind of just offering open days. So as of now, I've been doing Tuesdays and Thursdays, Tuesday, Thursday, and Saturday from 2 to 5. So that's my general open hour times. And I'm really excited to have it in the water a little bit longer, since not everyone who wanted to see it has had a chance. So this will be cool to actually get others to come and see it.
Good. Well, thank you very much for coming on, and thank you for the terrific project. We all appreciate it, and I did send pictures to everybody here on our board.
Thanks, appreciate that.
It's really terrific. Thank you so much for coming in tonight too.
Yeah.
Thank you, Scott.
Thank you.
Thanks,
And I guess, do I need to get another permit then to display? Because mine was unfortunately stolen.
And she'll have it ready for you tomorrow.
Oh, great. Okay.
Okay.
Well, thanks a lot. I appreciate it. All right.
Okay,
Everyone have a great night.
Good night.
Thank you.
thank
All right.
you.
Thanks.
Thanks, Scott.
Okay. So we have somebody on the line?
Yes. Do we want to take them?
Sure.
Okay. Give me 1 second, please. Hello, caller.
Hi,
Are
this is
you
Joe
still
Karpinski. Can you hear me?
There you go. Go ahead.
Okay.
Hi, Joe.
Hi, this is Joe
Francis.
Karpinski.
How are you?
Good. How are you? I just had
Good.
some concerns about the lazy point structure that is supposed to come in, the cubes that they want to put in vertically. I do live on Bayview Avenue, where we have geocubes that have been blocking our road for the last 3 years. I'm vehemently against these structures. I made some comments about the ones on Mulford that they wanted to put in. I know that the zoning board had denied them. Basically, this is becoming a big Band-Aid down here, where they started on Cranberry Hole Road. They did it over here on Bayview. They want to do it on Lazy Point. They want to do it on Mulford. Years ago, I know in 2012, before Sandy, and then after Sandy in 2013, the Conic Estuary program set up a whole plan about dredging. And then putting, going into Napeek Harbor, which, by the way, we know is heating up, which should be dredged too, which I hope that you guys are looking into and hopefully doing, getting the ball moving with that. I'm very concerned about the flora and the fauna, our clams, all of our scallops. But also along it, that whole plan that the Bionic Estuary program set forth, they had the dredging, putting approximately 47 metric tons back across, in front of Lazy Point, down past Mulford, Bayview, and Cranberry Hole, which would be about 5 feet in front of everybody's home. So I just wanted to voice my concerns and say that I think that you guys should not agree to this, and everybody should be looking into dredging before we do any other sort of anything down here.
Well, hey, Joe, the Conic Estuary recommendation, and that's what that was, there was no funding behind. Okay, and the project that we're talking about here is significantly more than the 47 metric tons that we're talking about in front of each location. The trustees have been basically working for the last year and a half or so on some feasibility and some engineering for exactly what you're talking about here. But just to kind of do some clarification on this specific project, I do not agree with the geotubes or the geobags that you're talking about, but this project is not that, and it's an attempt at doing something far less invasive on a trial basis of these pipes basically being driven into the beach.
Yeah, and vertically, I know they have them in Florida, and I know that they want to capture the sand, and they want to try to do it for. I believe they were asking for 3 years. I believe they were asking from you.
Yeah, and we're trying to vet this thing out in a way that if it's tried, certainly there's a period of time that it's tried, but we've also had some discussions, candid discussions with the applicant of sort of a what if it doesn't work? And they've actually expressed an interest in the sand nourishment, because clearly that whole shoreline along there needs sand on a far greater level than what you're trucking in with 10-wheelers or that is. And that was sort of our goal when we started kicking this around, is if we're able to open that east inlet and truly, do a dredging project that gets rid of that shoaling inside and gets good water exchange into Napeek Harbor, the question then becomes, where does the sand go for that? And presently, right out in front of Lazy Point, they're in good shape, but those properties that you described then in your area are at such a shortage of sand. It's a no-brainer as to where that sand should go.
Yeah, and then I know when you spoke of, the money, I know that the PEP, they don't have the money for it, but I know that they disclosed in those findings, they were saying if the town could basically come up with, and I'm only going to throw it out there, was, $500,000 from them and $500,000 from the county. But if you look at each of these projects, like the one right down here on Bayview, they spent $130,000. I don't know what this one over here is going to cost, but I'm assuming each one is about, six figures in cost. So my point too is also not only just to say it to you guys, but also to speak for all the people down here. I don't think these people are actually paying attention to what they actually have as options instead of putting the Band-Aid on everything.
Well, that's not really a Band-Aid, and they're fully aware of the options. But here's the thing. Right now, their option, okay, if we're talking about sand nourishment, is doing what I'm going to describe as the Band-Aid, where you're trucking sand in at 20 yards or 30 yards at a shot. And that truly is a Band-Aid, because you know what? What happens is you're getting a unit per cubic yard unit costs are up so darn high that it's prohibitive to really do the job. We are working on something there. We fortunately, and I don't know what kind of impact COVID and the economy is going to have on this, but we did get some support and some real interest from the State Parks Department, from some homeowner groups down at the south end of Napeague Harbor. And I think these 4 property owners have expressed an interest here. So there might be an opportunity for a consortium of individuals and the public to fund this thing, and everybody gets what they're looking for. But it's not, but this isn't something that's honestly is going to happen this year or next year. This is something that's probably, I'd say, between 3 and 5 years down the road.
Yeah. Yeah, well, just my concern when I hear more about any type of structures that are hardened coming down this way. Like I said, we haven't been able to use our beach down here for 3 years. 3 summer seasons have come and gone, and the beach is getting destroyed, and they don't take care of it the proper way. So when you guys were speaking with the last group, about people actually looking at it, actually following through with the permits, and actually following the letter of their permits to what they say. They haven't been followed here. So my concern is that they might not be followed down there. So if you guys are overseeing it, I would hope that it's going to be followed more to a T.
Well, I hope so myself, and we're doing our best here to, the fact that we're airing this discussion, I think demonstrates the transparency that this thing's getting.
All right. Well, thank you for your time.
Thank you, Joe. Matt, is there anybody else online?
That's it. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. All right, so let's move on to new business under aquaculture. 2021 Aquaponic Harbor Mosquito Larvae Survey.
I just wanted to this evening give a little update on my outreach to the various different agencies and parties concerned from last year going forward for 2021. I had a very lovely and nice, informative discussion with Dr. Nicole Marr of the Nature Conservancy. And I had reached out to her earlier, everyone in the earlier fall, about setting a date to get together. That would include the Nature Conservancy, the town of East Hampton, Department of Natural Resources, Kim Shaw, Melissa Winslow, Elaney, the people who have worked with us, Bill, John, Mike Martinson, also the Suffolk County Vector, Tim Iwaneko, and our Suffolk County legislator, Bridget Fleming. We have typically had meetings to discuss each year what we're going to do. So I just wanted to let you know I'm working on that. I do have some dates from Bridget. Dr. Marr is reaching out to Tom Iwaneko so that she can receive the data from him. And I actually learned quite a bit about salt marsh rehabilitation and restoration, and to help with the what goes on in the salt marsh and how important it is that we address the next step. So I'm looking at either sometime in December, if it's available, or in January so that we can get a head start. Tom Ivaneko had said last year that we have 3 years of data and that he's hopeful that that can start the process of actually going into planning. So Dr. Marr is very essential to this, as well as all the other agencies. And so I just wanted to let you know that we're already working on this for next year. And I will keep you posted as we go. Anybody? Oh, also, I should say, we discussed drones as a means to really see the salt marsh. I've offered to take her and walk her through the polygon that I know best so that she could see the actual photographs I sent to Suffolk County Vector and see firsthand what they're looking like at low tide. So John and Mike and Bill, if you want to, I will just reach out to you as I have a better idea of when dates seem to be forming for this meeting, and we'll probably do it by Zoom. And that's it. Just wanted to give you the heads up on it. Comments? Anybody? Okay, moving right
Okay.
along.
Thank you, Susan.
Thank you, Susan.
You're welcome.
Hey, Jim, I just realized that Mark Laska is actually here to speak about his project, or
He is
to listen in about us
speaking
when
about
we
his
talk about
project.
it.
Do you want
Would you
to?
like to address that now?
Well, we have
Pretty timely.
we have Mike Walton on there, but if we got somebody sitting out waiting for this, I don't think the Mr. Walton is on tonight, is he? If not, let's just jump.
I don't see him.
Yeah, let's just jump over to the other project there.
Oh, wait,
Okay.
excuse me. Well, I'm sorry, we're not going to cover the Walton
We
property?
will. We're just going to come back to it a little later.
Oh, okay, because I also set it up for photographs, if you'd like as well.
All right.
Good evening, Mark. How are you?
Good. How are you? Thank you.
Great. I'm sorry, I didn't realize you were here. Might have brought you in on the previous conversation.
No problem.
Well, you had the opportunity to speak up, Mark. You know, you
Here we
Hung
go.
us out to dry.
I was.
you know, we're in the trenches taking grenades here, and you're sitting in California. Right?
We've got plenty of our own problems on this coast.
Hey, so Jim, you've
So-
been spearheading this.
Well, I wouldn't describe it as spearheading because that sort of describes the project. Listen, everybody's had a copy of this application since going back to March, I believe. And we brought this up at our last meeting. The town ZBA, their council, has asked us to act as lead here. I would like to ask our individual board members to step in and hear them out as what their likes, their concerns, because this is not one that we're not really able to kick the can down the road. I think we're going to have to weigh in on this. So whoever wants to start this off, feel free.
Yeah, this is Rick. Last time we were together, there was some discussion about, well, what if this is a failure to lift off in this particular application? We know there's a lot of challenges with the channel to the east, and when that opened up as the primary, things seemed to deteriorate pretty quickly. So, that was something that seemed to be of importance to the board. Do you have anything you can add to the conversation tonight?
Just to clarify, was that a question to me?
Yes.
Hope so.
Yeah. So the only thing that I would add is that I think Christopher and a couple of other board members suggested that there could be a permit with conditions attached to it. And some of those conditions could be a description of actions that we would take should the project fail. So to me, failure, the entire system is already failing. It's losing about a foot I'm sorry, about 3 feet of beach a year. So if we put in these PEMs, I would say failure is in one of two places. One place is it doesn't reverse, slow down, or stop the erosional forces on the beach. And the second kind of failure could be if they pop out and create some kind of nuisance to the public. So if they pop out, if they pop out, we said that we would put them back in immediately. And I've described how we have house watchers and cameras that will be installed, and we'll have a relationship with a contractor, you know, if not based on the town, certainly based on in the East End, that could be responsive within a day of getting a report of a device coming out. If the whole thing doesn't work, meaning erosion doesn't slow down, then we'll remove them after giving them 3 years. I hope that we have.
Is this narrative written in your current submission to us?
Yes, it is. Described in great detail.
Okay, so these specific points are in writing at this time.
Correct.
Okay.
Now, I think what would be important on our end is if we're going to issue a permit on this, is that we put language along the lines of what they've put in their prospectus. That language should be reiterated back in the permit. So, anybody else?
I have a question that I'm not sure that I asked this before or not, so forgive me, Mark, if I have asked you. But I'm wondering, because other people have asked me, what happens when these PEMs are installed and then they're shoaling to the south of those neighbors? What happens to them? There's some concern that they will then be facing the lack of their beach being washed away. So I don't know that we've addressed that or not.
That's an excellent question, Susan. We have not specifically addressed it. As I understand it, these things do not operate like jetties do. You know, you put on a jetty and then the property down the beach from you ends up suffering from the erosional forces. These create a local pressure differential that allows sand to accrete around them without causing any effect on the neighboring properties. That's what I've been told. That's how they have operated on the other projects where they've been installed. Granted, none in the northeastern U.S. So I would say perhaps the way to address that is another permit condition, that if we see some kind of effect on an adjacent property, then that would cause us to look, you know, at either removal or adjusting the PEM locations. But I would also say that it would be hard to tell such an effect after a year. You would want to give it enough time so that we see coastal hydrodynamic forces in effect. So it would be hard to install them and 6 months later have somebody complain about their beach changing. You know, you would have to really give it time to make a cause and effect.
Right, and I understand that that's a 3-year period from our last meeting with you. I did inquire with 2 experts in coastal erosion, and that seemed to be a prevalent question about what happens because the project is so new. It's not really been tested other than in Florida thus far. So
no, actually, Susan, there's been some literature on this methodology, goes back some 20 some odd years. And the only thing I can say is in looking back through some of the there's only like 3 papers on this out there, is the one I'd say positive thing in terms of the efficacy here was really not necessarily demonstrated. But one thing that was not demonstrated either is that it accelerated erosion. So I think to answer maybe your question is that's a positive side here. I think to me, looking at this, if we approve this project, I think the risk to neighboring properties is much, much lower than what say you would get with a stone revetment,
yes,
or these geocubes or any of the other methodologies that are being thrown out there that come under the heading of a structure. So
Right. I recall the article you're referring to, written by two people, I think, and I can't remember their names, but they were preeminent in describing this type of project. I think it's a very valid and least impactful project from what you have described, Mark. I just had that question and I wanted to make sure that we covered it.
Yes, and I could provide the literature that Jim was referring to. It was written by a NOAA scientist who has evaluated the technology. There are a few review papers. Again, one of the reasons that I like this site is because it's a small, relatively isolated site that we're viewing as a pilot project. You know, as somebody was talking about with another project earlier, they said, you know, caution, if you allow this one dock, you might get 10 more. And I would say to the trustees the same here about PEM. If we find that this thing is successful out at Lazy Point, then I expect that you'll get a heck of a lot more applications to install these things. And that would be a good problem because it's a low impact, low cost, and hopefully demonstrated, proven approach to slowing erosion.
I'm pretty comfortable with this project. I would just like that to see us add a condition that we get a monitoring report perhaps twice a year, maybe in the spring and the fall, just to allay the concerns of the neighbors that this could be causing a problem on the beach, either by them popping up or somehow causing some other problem.
I think Mark had said that there will be a camera installed to see what is going on at the beach. So that's another avenue of protection as well. So we can actually see what's going on.
Yeah,
I'd like to see that reported to us a couple of times a year.
Yeah, so John, I think in the write-up, I committed to an annual report, but I have no problem with a twice a year report. And I could either amend the report or you can make that a permit condition. We'd have no problem to submit that to you. And I'll also add that Chris Anderson has offered his balcony where we would put a webcam out there. And he has a house watcher, and I think there are other folks that are year-round residents on Lazy Point so there'll certainly be eyes on the beach to be looking for any of these things popping out.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Hey, Jim, Chris here. Is there a provision in place for the trustees to retain some control over the idea of success, failure, or if and when these things do need to be removed, that decision-making process? Or at this point, does it seem the contractor has the sole ability to determine whether or not these things get removed?
Well, I think, Chris, I think if what you're asking is would the trustees be able to collect the data themselves? Yeah, they probably could at an expense to the trustees. I would say in this situation here, it's a little like, in fact, it's not a little like, it's very much like a lot of your DEC permits that are being issued for restoration projects nowadays basically require an annual report to be made each year on the project, basically with some photographs accompanying it and an evaluation. It's somewhat subjective. Typically, those evaluations are prepared by not the owner, not the contractor, but the applicant's engineer or agent, who in this case would be Mark, to compile that data. I personally, I would feel comfortable with that. We have the luxury of being able to drive down here anytime we want to and look at this area and sort of decide whether we think it's succeeding or failing. So I would opt, personally, I would opt for something along those lines. When you put it on the back of the trustees, guys, realize we would have to probably hire somebody who's accredited as an engineer that can truly evaluate this. I don't think it really could be subject to either me or Susan going down there and saying, I think it looks good or I think it looks bad. Because quite frankly, I don't think I have the credentials to do that.
Yeah, Jim, I'm not so much asking or concerned about the data collection process, more just trying to think fast forward a little bit. And in the event there's some sort of dispute over success, failure, increased erosion or decreased, and what the process would be at that point. For example, in the event 3 years from now, this gentleman comes back and says, it's not really working, but we're going to leave him in for another 3 years, another 5 to see if it works. Well, the trustees retaining the control over that decision-making process.
Well, I think the trustees, if we've got a permit that basically goes out 3 years, you answered your own question. The applicant comes back, applies for a 3-year extension on this permit. We have the opportunity, Chris, at that point to either extend that permit or revoke the permit and ask for these pipes to be removed. So I'm pretty comfortable with that. I'm truly not that concerned about it because there is a specific timeline attached to this. It isn't
right. But Jim, may I interrupt for 1 sec?
Sure.
We do need to understand, maybe some measurement metrics where if something did develop, should it be an engineer's review is invoked? To Chris's point, there could be a situation, and you even shared that point, that goes beyond our means, so to speak. So, maybe there could be 1 or 2 other things to think about from the engineering side.
Well, I think, simple language on something like that in the event that we have a disagreement here, that we would ask this to be evaluated by a licensed coastal engineer, somebody that does have errors and omissions. And that's something easy enough to do. And I think it's something, Mark, I would hope that you would find comfort in.
No, we will be collecting very, very specific data. We're going to be taking all sorts of measurements of the distance from the shore to the water to the PEM on a regular basis. We will quantify all of this data. We'll map it, and I will have no problem, as you proposed, Jim, turning that over to a third party for them to evaluate, a third party technical outside party for them to evaluate and interpret. We'll provide the interpretation of our data, and we can have a third party say that Laska is telling us, something happy happened here, or he's blowing smoke. And while I certainly can't commit my client to this, I'm sure that we can ask for the funding for the trustees to engage their own third-party expert for a peer review of our report at the end.
And guys, I don't know what, Chris, am I understanding this right? This is only in the event that we feel that we are getting smoke and that we have a disagreement over the success or failure here, and that we feel that the project should be discontinued.
Yeah, I think you answered the question pretty succinctly, and my recommendation to the board is going to be that we're going to be comfortable with it the way it stands, so long as the procedure is cut and dry. As for removing these things, if after year 3 comes up and the permit is up, if the trustees and the group decides that we don't want it anymore, that there's a timeline for removal of these things, and that's that. So as long as that language is clear, I'm comfortable with it.
I have a couple of points. Will the data, Mark, that you're describing, that you collect, and you would be amenable to sending it to a coastal erosion engineer or someone that we choose, the trustees, would that data also be sent to the trustees for our files? And how often is data going to be gathered? Is that in the contract?
Yeah, so Susan, the data that I'm referring to is exactly what I would put in the biannual reports that John and Jim were talking about. So you'll see the data presented, both summarized with an appendix of the raw measurements. I don't know that you'd want to submit each half-year report to a coastal engineer, but
No.
certainly after
Well, I'm
a
referring,
three-year
like,
period.
if it's sent to us and we decided we wanted to engage the expertise of a coastal engineer, we would have the reports as well, so we can, speak to that person directly and have reference to the actual report and data that you get.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely, and we're transparent with our data. I mean, we're a scientific environmental consulting company. I mean, if there's something that we collected that for some reason we didn't put in the report, we're happy to provide it to you and or your consultant. We will be very open book about this.
And guys, I think the 3-year timeline really simplifies this. So when this permit's up and Mark comes back and says, it looks like it's starting to slow down. We're now only seeing 1 to 2 feet of erosion per year. And we're still kind of not sold on it. We have the opportunity to condition any extended permit on this evaluation with a coastal erosion specialist or whatever. So again, now that I'm clear on the 3-year timeline, I think we're easily going to retain that control in the event where we're struggling to make a decision whether or not to renew this type of permit.
I'd just like to be clear that will we also write into this permit at this point that whether these structures remain in the beach or are removed from the beach, regardless of whether this is a success or a failure, is solely at our discretion? Chris, is kind of more to you, and Jim, maybe this question?
Well, I would, yes. Hey, John, I think that's language that I think everybody here, including the applicant, should be ready to accept. Okay, we're talking about something that's occurring on our property. So I think as sort of owners of the land, that's our option.
Okay.
Yeah, I would also just add to that there's going to be other regulatory entities that are going to oversee this as well. The ZBA is going to address this next, and we've applied for a coastal permit from the DEC. And so I think that, everybody will see those monitoring reports. Everybody will be curious to see how these things evolve.
So I'm seeing that we're moving here towards a motion. I guess is this an appropriate time to
make a
do
motion
that and leave the conditions
to our council? I would.
Yeah, or should we see the conditions first?
I would.
Yeah, I'd like to see the conditions first, honestly.
Okay, so we don't want to vote on this.
I agree.
Okay.
I think we have a little more work to do on this one, Jim. I'm sorry. Just one more meeting, I can get there, I think.
All right. So Mark, same time in 2 weeks.
Would you like me to try to provide any materials to help your decision making, or is this internal to the trustees?
Well, it's internal, but you know what? It may be beneficial to our council, just simply for some of the language and some of the definitions in the conditions for you guys to talk.
That'd be great.
Yeah, that works for me.
And
as well.
also, Mark, if you would include the article, the peer review of the project, which I had, and it's been a while, so
Yes, no
that's
problem.
very helpful to refresh ourselves.
I'll send some materials around, and Chris, I'll reach out directly to you.
Great.
Through Arlene, and we'll figure out what other information I need to provide you.
Yeah.
Sounds good.
What I can do, Mark, is I can forward you Chris's contact information. You guys can get together.
Great. Thank you, Jim. And thank you to trustees for continued consideration of this.
Okay.
Thanks.
Thank you, Mark.
Thank you very much, Mark.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
All right, next on the list, we have Harbor Management, Lions Head Beach Association requesting emergency help with severe erosion where their bulkhead ends. Is anyone going down there to look at that?
No,
not yet, Francis.
I think we got
we got some pictures of it, though.
Yeah.
So I don't know if it's a true emergency, but they've definitely gotten some scouring there.
my question about what I saw in the pictures is that scouring coming from the high tides and any activity from the water, or is it coming from all those kayakers launching their kayaks?
I think it's John, looking at the pictures, it looked like it could be a combination of overwash on the bulkhead. It could be a combination of road runoff, okay, because and a combination of foot traffic. So it didn't look like something that was going to be that difficult to mitigate. In fact, they're going to have some material to do that with when they do their dredging, and then maybe revegetate that area and establish a pathway down to the water that is not in such a erosion-prone location.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. Some kind of a bluff restoration there might be a first stab at dealing with that problem.
Do you guys want to go over there sometime?
Well, I'm working over there next week, so I can stop in.
They're just asking for our opinions here, aren't they, Rick?
Well, yes, and I suppose ultimately a permit. So, I did suggest that, an agent may be appropriate, and or, possibly an, design person to come up with some type of a restoration like you guys are talking about. So I think they're still in the early stages, but for some of the residents, I guess it was a bit of a surprise to see what had happened.
So are we tabling this for the moment?
Yeah, this isn't something that we may even be acting on, because it's not a request for a permit. It's really a request for advice. So, I mean, I can actually swing by there. Like I said, I'm working on Bay Inlet next week, so I can just pop in and have a quick look about it. Hell, for all I know, I may be part of the cause of the erosion. I think I may have walked in there the last time I was there.
All right, Jim. We'll see what you have to think about that.
All right.
All right. Let's go back to Nappy Lazy Point. We have a request from Michael Walton, who's the leaseholder at 273 Shore Road, Lot 8S at Lazy Point, to replace his front windows and to raise his roof.
I'm going to share my screen, and Jim, you can, if I can do that, share screen. Where am I?
You can share screen. That would be great.
I'm going to show, I'll put the pictures up and then you can talk about that. There we go. Okay. Bear with me 1 second. Well, hold on. Oh boy. Okay, where is my email? Maybe oops. Okay, gosh darn it. There are other pictures. Sorry about this. I'm a little slow. Well, I'm going to have to do this manually. Here's picture number 1. I put them all together. Oh, wait.
Yeah,
here it is. Can you see my screen?
I can see your screen.
Okay. So there's, okay, go ahead. Sorry.
Actually, Susan, we'll just scroll through. I think, did everybody get a chance to look at these?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. So everybody's seen them.
Yes.
I think probably the most important picture is the picture of the little drawing that was prepared.
Coming. There we go.
Okay. The little drawing shows almost like a shed roof dormer, basically raising up the windows a little bit, which if you turn back to the photograph quickly, you can kind of get the reason. And I'm sure this is one of those properties that if you stand in the house, you kind of bend down to look out the window. And all that raising of the roof is, which, by the way, I saw the questions on that. If you scale off the drawing, which does appear to be to scale, it's about 1 foot 4 inches is what they're looking to raise. The roof itself isn't going up. It's just the the soffit or whatever is going up. But it really looks like the goal is to get better light into the house and actually have you be able to look out the window from standing as opposed to sitting at a table. I look at it as pretty benign.
Yeah, I do too, but what is this going to require besides a building permit? What's the situation with the ZBA down there?
Well, the ZBA, they're not changing the footprint here. And as far as the issues of FEMA, this is a elevated property to begin with. Listen, that we've had multiple applications over the years like this. The last one that we had, which was a waterfront property, was the Vatter property, which really came through our door along the same lines. They were looking to replace the windows. They were looking to do things, and then ultimately came back asking to replace a deck. The process here, John, is this. We're not the building permit department. We're not going to issue a permit for this work. We're going to issue a letter basically saying that we don't have a problem with what was proposed. It's up to the building department to evaluate and recognize the threshold, whether this requires other permits, whether this requires DEC permits, whether this is going to require a natural resources special permit, or whether this is limited in scope to the point that they can just issue a building permit on it.
So in the eventuality that the building department determines that this does need to meet FEMA requirements and it doesn't currently, and we've signed off on it, is that done deal, or back, or what?
John, the FEMA requirements are something that if a property owner, whether they voluntarily or by direction of a town code, come to us to go to make their property FEMA compliant. We, in the discussions on the leases, had agreed that we would not stand in the way of that. And why would we? I mean, a previous board tried to do exactly what you're implying. And listen, if a property is deemed that the only way you can make the changes to the property is to bring it into FEMA compliance, I mean, by issuing 35-year leases on these properties, we agreed to let these property owners do what they needed to do to maintain the longevity of the property.
But
I think what they want to do, personally, I think, putting in new windows in and a new front door, certainly you can see by the windows that these are older and they're not as sufficient as the newer hurricane-proof windows. And I don't know so much about the roof line, but it seems to me, as Jim, you're pointing out, that we gave them the 35-year lease. It was to help them maintain and keep their property in good shape. So I think I would be in support of a letter for this project. I think it's helping a homeowner improve the property to keep it safe and keep it up to date. Certainly, I don't, putting a new front door and new windows in sounds perfectly fine to me, and we should encourage that.
John, to your point, if you don't mind, I'll chip in on this. And on this particular project, I do not foresee this project triggering a FEMA compliance. But I think to answer your question, if the scope of work needs to be changed or modified as a result of a determination by the ZBA or by the DEC or otherwise. If the scope of work changes, I think that would require the homeowner to come back to us for review and to modify that letter. So I don't think it's the end or the end of the deal, so to speak. If the scope of work changes, we're going to be issuing a letter on this as in this scope of work. So I think if it changes, they do need to come back to us.
Well, and they,
Okay.
and you know,
Well, the reason, in my mind, it's one thing to, want these people to have this improved windows and roof. But, if we sign off on it and then we don't have any further opportunity, if it becomes FEMA compliant, now this house becomes 6 or 8 feet higher, and then it's a different situation for the neighbors. And, in other words, I'd like to know beforehand what the whole project's going to be before I sign off on it. Not that I necessarily wouldn't, and not that I don't agree with.
well, what you're describing, John, is essentially a catch-22. Okay, they can't pull a building permit on these properties without a letter of support from our board.
They can't get a ruling from the building department as to FEMA compliance based on what they want to do.
Well, I don't think they would prefer to go through FEMA compliance. If I was the homeowner, that would be sort of like the last thing I want to hear, because the economics to the FEMA compliance is considerably more than the cost of these windows and the door.
No, that's kind of my point, is that if they went to the building department and said,
John,
does this meet FEMA? Do I need to meet FEMA compliance for this project? And they said, yes, this is 52% of the value of the structure. That would give them the ability to ratchet it back, wouldn't it? To say, well, I'm only going to do 6 windows instead of 8.
Yes, it would. And we could basically condition that letter to just the plan that we're looking at.
That's the way I see it too, John and Jim. Again, if the scope of work changes to where it needs to be FEMA compliant, that's a entirely different project where they need to come back to the trustees for approval.
Yeah, you could craft that language into a letter fairly easily, right?
Okay. All right, thanks. My question's answered.
Okay, can we, can somebody make?
I'll make a motion to give a letter of support for this project for the Bolton residents.
I'll second it.
Is there a second? Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Okay, passed and carried.
Okay, let me take this down.
All right, we ready to move on? Acabonic East Channel dredging spoil placement. Bill has sent the letter off to the DEC to inform them of our desire to move some of this sand from the dredging further south, as it's currently placed adjacent to the channel. So we're basically just waiting for a response from them. I think they passed it on to their technical staff for review.
Yeah, they passed it along to the technical committee. We're expecting to hear from them fairly quickly. I don't know if the board understands, we've done this a couple of times in the past. We found that leaving the sand at the northern end just facilitates it washing right back into the channel. And so we want to make beneficial use of the sand. There's a group of homeowners down there that have several times paid for the transportation. And we we consider putting trustee sand on a trustee beach. And we've worked out the details. The way it works, we hire, I believe Bistrian's on the town, on an annual contract with the town. They do the work. We pay them and we're reimbursed by the homeowners. And I don't know, do we need a motion to go forward with this or?
I don't know whether we need a motion, but I'd be willing to make a motion on this. Before we
We don't
vote
have,
on-
we don't have a answer from the DEC yet. Shouldn't we wait for?
Right, yeah, we should wait for that.
Probably better. But I think, you know what, if we can just make sure that everybody understands, I guess there was a member of the public that questioned us moving this sand. And unfortunately was framed by an employee of the town in a manner that it described us basically selling the sand to go to an individual member of the public's house. At no point has any sand from Acabonic or Louse Point there been deposited in somebody's yard. It goes on the beach in front of their houses. It's areas that are presently sand starved. It extends the life of the dredging. It extends the life of the beach. And in doing so, it gives the public more access to the public's land. So I think there was an individual who had some real issues out there, and I hope they're listening tonight, and I hope that answers their question.
Thank you, Jim, for clarifying that, and thank you, Bill, for clarifying that same point.
Yeah, I just like a feeling from the board if we get the permit, if we get the permit, is there support for continuing this project? Okay.
I support it.
Yes,
I have
otherwise you
one
won't have a
question.
beach there any longer.
I have one question first on that is, do we have an agreement with any homeowner? I mean,
Yes.
we're gonna move sand, pay for moving sand and prior to an agreement for somebody to reimburse us for moving it down towards their area or?
I think that they pay for the transport
They do.
first. They have to agree to first paying for that before we do it. Is that correct?
We've had conversations and they're very interested in doing this.
You know, this is one of those opportunities where the public, at no cost, actually, at the end of the day, to the public, our beaches get extended because it helps protect these properties. And I think it's a win-win on everybody's end.
Yeah.
I'd like to remind the board also that there was a time where this area of beach had applications for revetment construction. And they were willing to take this through the justice system. And we've been able to work out this arrangement and been able to do a soft solution. It's been working extremely well. The beach down there lasts so much longer than the beach to the north. It's higher, it's wider. Public has easy access through that once they get around the existing revetments, because we do lose beach in front of those. It's just a win-win for everybody.
Right.
So there's no reason to not
Good
continue.
walk.
I'd like to point out that there was considerable questions about this coming from the Acabonic Protection Committee, and between Bill, Jim, and Francis, who were very helpful in describing the history of this particular dredging through the years. And I'm hoping that APC is watching now and has heard all of this and feels far more comfortable. I will say that normally so many people who raised an issue about this are actually long gone after the summer season, but we've had the influx of people from the city who have decided to stay on due to the pandemic. So for anybody who's been concerned, this is an ongoing project. And It's, as everybody's agreeing, it's a win-win situation. The beach is there and it's for the public to enjoy.
Okay, so we'll wait for a response from the DEC and then we'll vote for board approval. Okay. Committee reports, Georgia Pond. Vote up. Yeah, Jim, are you aware that the gut closed over the weekend?
Well, it actually closed yesterday.
Yesterday.
Okay,
Well,
I was standing there Friday afternoon. It was flowing just fine.
Well, yesterday was Sunday.
Yeah. So listen, the good news, guys, is we opened Georgia Pond last week. The bad news is it's closed.
What causes that to close so
Can
rapidly?
we open it up again?
The south, you know what it is? You know what it is? We've had this east southeast wind for the last several days, and anytime we've had consistent weather along those lines, it, as a rule, it does one of two things. It either closes it or it moves it to the west. I'm thanking God that it did not move it to the west.
What is the remedy now that it's closed? Are we going to readdress?
No, there is none.
That's it.
There is none. What's going to happen is I think the next phase of this is we're getting ready to send out the bid package for the dredging. And what has happened, which is a little bit of an anomaly over the last two seasons of the dredging, is typically the contractor has to open the pond to lower the level of the pond before they can start doing the dredging.
Right.
But the last two consecutive years, the pond has still been opened from that October let. So they were working between tides and stuff. So coming up on this year's dredging bid and stuff, it's actually a more typical year. So the pond will be let again in all likelihood in January or February when whoever the successful contractor is gets ready to start doing the dredging.
Okay.
Have you had a conversation with anyone up at Georgia about that, Jim?
About
the plan that it's going to be reopened when the dredging.
No. I mean, we had a great attendance at the letting here last Monday. There was probably 20 or so people down there. But the day the pond was let, nobody was thinking about it closing up. But we'll certainly be able to share that. We have plenty of time.
Okay.
I was down there today, and I looked like the cut had migrated to the east from where it was originally opened.
Yeah, but John, it didn't migrate very far.
It cut quite a bit into that dune to the east.
Yeah, but it always, the cut widens. But
I thought we were voting tonight on whether to open it relatively quickly. I think it's my concern. I know we're not now. It's going to wait till the dredging takes place. But my concern would have been these, this hurricane, remnants of the hurricane coming up, and then possibly another one behind it.
What, flooding the pond and
no, just closing it right back up again. If we were going to open it.
Yeah, I mean, when I first got on the board, there was this thing where we rushed to open the pond in advance of a storm so that the water didn't back up in there.
Right.
And Francis can attest to that. Every time we did that, it did nothing other than basically we threw some money at this thing. It closed right back up. So.
All right, and that brings us to the Georgia bid, as you just mentioned, for the dredging.
Yes. So I think it's really a matter of just changing the dates. We're going to basically do the same bid that we did last year. And Arlene, when will that be ready to go out? We have to notice it in the Star as well. Are you there?
Arlene's muted.
Yes, I'm sorry, my phone froze. Yeah, I can get on it tomorrow, no problem. And if we have it all reviewed by Chris Carrillo and yourself and Francis,
Yeah,
we
I
could get it in this Friday. Maybe I'll get a
Yeah.
draft out and then you guys can do your final look at it.
That'd be great. Thanks.
All right, back to harbor management, bid package for fresh pond dredging.
Okay, we received that today from Drew Bennett, which he said he would get it to me before our next meeting.
Here
Which
it
did.
And I don't know.
I think he did a good job.
I got to be honest with you guys. If I'd like Arlene, if you could pull out the language from the previous bids and lay it up against it. There's some real significant typos in this thing. Clearly, it was a bid package that was originally put together for a village project. There's considerable language in here regarding prevailing wage and those and that which I think we should strike from this application. There is something that's a little different here. Our previous bids for this work have been basically lump sum bids for the work. This one describes the contractor being paid in the actual amount of sand that they move, and that'll be determined by a before and after survey. And the only concern I have here, I think I'm thankful to Drew because we're elevating our bidding and stuff up to an area where I think we should be, but we may have gone a little bit past it here. In the sense, my concern is that some of the conditions that we built into this bid package for the contractor, the costs for the verification and stuff like that may actually be prohibitive to the trustees at the end of the day. What it is doing, it's adding cost here, and it's adding cost. There's a benefit to that cost, but I'm not sure that the benefit will outweigh the cost differential. If the project was a bit bigger, I think it would make more sense. What I would like to do is have the harbor management committee have an opportunity to read this, make their comments, make their questions, and maybe we could have a conversation. It could even be over the phone before we put this out.
I'm available.
Jim, I'd just like to add that I did get a call from Drew today as well regarding the prevailing wage. I was able to, review and research the topic of the prevailing wage, Article 8 and Article 9 of the New York State Code, and was able to determine that the prevailing wage under Articles 8 and 9 do not apply to this type of project. Typically, these are going towards construction projects, residential and condominium construction, roadways, sewer projects, things of that nature. And then the other side of the coin is service type projects for building spaces, janitorial work and things like that. So it's pretty clear that dredge work doesn't apply.
Yeah, but you know what happens is I think there's some edits that are going to be needed on the bid package for the simple fact that there is language in the bid package related to the prevailing wage, and it also carries through in the form of the bonding and such on this. We've really elevated, I think we may have elevated our own overhead on this bid package beyond where we necessarily want it to be. And Bill, I think of any of us, you probably have had more experience down this line. I don't know whether you had a chance to look this over.
No, but I think we should be, going for a lump sum price.
Okay.
I took a look at this, and one question I had is there any town involvement of this? I did notice that one of the spoil sites is in front of Fresh Pond Road parking area behind the bulkhead.
Well, John, if you get down there, I think what that's all about is that bulkhead. I don't know whether, I think it's more a case of it just erosion from the parking, from the road runoff.
No, I know that, but I'm just wondering, is that town property? Is the town going to have to review this, or is the town going to say they have to review it? It seems to me that that's spoils put on the beach. That's one thing, but if it's put on behind the bulkhead, is that town property? If it's not trustee property,
I think if it is town property, it's under the purview of the highway superintendent.
Why would dredge spoil go upland?
I think because the reason Jim said it's eroding a little bit behind the bulkhead there, and he probably figured that's a good place to sort of level it out, fill it in.
And it's also part of the access point on this as well.
Yeah, but it's taking it out of the system.
Trust me, the way the parking lot erodes over there, I think it goes right back into the system.
Well, the DEC accepted
I think it's still in the literal drift. I know.
Okay.
The what do you call it? The language here was the language that the DEC approved. Okay, and if you read through the DEC permit, it seems to allow for all of this.
All right.
I'm just wondering if the town is going to say, "Hey, wait a minute."
I don't know.
Let me know when you guys are going to.
We got to review it.
Let me know when you guys are going to talk about this, because I'd like to put my 2 cents in.
Okay.
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 Anything else? Anybody else?
Nope.
All right. Roads, Town Line Road, Merchants Path. Anything on that? Rick?
Thanks, Francis. At the last meeting, we talked a lot about the use and possible abuse of the area. And I think we came to the conclusion that a logical first step would be to put together a cleanup of the road and to understand a little bit better the property lines with some of the neighboring properties. Unfortunately, I haven't had a chance to really move too much further on that. I know John and Susan were down there. If they want to weigh in, that's great. Otherwise, I would ask to table this until the next meeting.
Okay. I'm just going to reiterate what I said at our last meeting, which is I sent pictures to everyone. We showed the fire pit and all the debris on both sides. John, the driver's side, my side, and the job will require a large pickup truck, especially at the fire pit. Rick, you did ask me if I would come up with some ideas for signs. I'm working on it from scratch. So I'm coming up with some language, shapes of signs, some ideas, and I'll try to do something that's a little more formal. But I do think that some sort of signage would be appropriate so people know that this is not a garbage dump. There were, as you saw from the pictures, even large tree trunks that had been severed and thrown in the middle of the wider part of the road. There were trail bike activity going on, and some pickup trucks, people I think are using it for pleasure, to have fun on the trail bikes, but also using it as a road that connects them from Division Street on down to Industrial Road and even south of that. We accessed it from Industrial Road, and it is a rather interesting trail. It could be very beautiful, but people have been dumping a lot of their debris. It looks as though things have been there for quite some time. And there was a huge amount of trash that had been burned at the top where the burn pit is. So I'm going to come up with some signs, but I would like to ask the people who are watching this evening, it's a beautiful area. It's very private and lovely. So please don't deposit your trash there. Whatever you bring in someplace, whether it be the beach or our roadways, please take it with you and deposit it responsibly at a legitimate dump site.
All right. Thank you, Susan. Guess we're moving on to, let's see, we did McGinn. Moving on to administrative. We have no bills tonight, but we do have a request for advance payment from Steve Borner. He's requesting $1,250 to be taken out of his final payment of $5,000. Payment is for the historic research determining trustee ownership of the northwest area of East Hampton. How does the board feel about advancing him an additional $1,250?
Well, do we have a document that's readable from him yet?
We've been waiting for a report from him on how he's progressing on this. But
Right.
he's
Hey,
having...
Francis, can I try to shed a little light on this one?
Sure, please.
Yes, Steve, has been working on this. He has been stymied in some of his efforts to get into, some areas to do research, obviously with COVID. So the project has taken a little bit longer. I believe right now there's a $5,000 balance on the project. He was asking for an interim payment. He is planning to present to the board on November 23rd. Last year, we had him come in at the first meeting in December, which is our last public meeting, and there was just so much business on there, it couldn't really be done in a thoughtful and, complete way. So, I thought bringing him in at the meeting before would make more sense. What we could do is, maybe prepare the check and, he can pick it up at the meeting so he gets an interim payment and then submit the written report afterwards. So there is a connection of progress and payment. I think it's fair to consider this because, COVID has delayed his work a little bit. I know he's done a lot of work, has compiled a lot of data, and is working hard to get ready for the meeting. But I understand Jim's point about tying the dots together.
I'm going to just pipe in here and say to Rick's mention of the pandemic, I think that that's a very valid reason for him asking for some advance. And if he is coming to the November 23rd meeting with is it the final report, Rick, on this?
I would say it's a presentation in lieu of the final report because I think, last time we did this on Cartwright Island, we had feedback and I think we got a really good final report on that one. So I'd like, I think that would be the way to try to go, is to get the presentation and feedback from the board and then, put the final polish on it. So, tying an interim payment into that two-step process kind of connects the dots. So that's something I could get behind.
I feel similarly. I think, do we have a timeline on the final report though? Do we have a date that he is supposed to have that ready for us?
It was to be done this year. I think we can get close to that based on how much material he has to really finish it up. Might be first quarter of next year, but certainly there needs to be a timeline considered and, not too far out in the future.
Yeah, I'd like to see a specific date, not just sometime next year in the first quarter, but could we pin that down to a specific month and have him come in and feel comfortable?
I think in part, Susan, that would be tied into the November 23rd presentation as to how the board felt about how complete the project was. So it might be something where it's just some editing, or it might be something that requires more content or different organization of the content, which would impact the timeline. So it's just a pretty broad scope. So I don't think I can answer that accurately right now. I think that the meeting of the 23rd would dictate that.
Rick, this might be a big ask, but if he's going to give a presentation, would it be possible for him to send it to us so that we could preview it, take a look at the slides and think about it before we are presented with it?
It's possible, John, but I really think he is looking forward to presenting it to some degree, and I think he's going to be right up against the wire to really get this in a format that is meaningful with the geographic reference of west to east, going around the Horn and the harbor, and articulating trustee transfers and putting that all together. So I think he's going to be up against the timeline.
How about like an outline of the presentation so we kind of know what to expect,
Of course.
I just find that easier when I see something beforehand, before I actually start hearing it at a meeting.
Yeah, sounds good. Well, let's work on that and get the board the presentation outline ahead of time.
All right, thanks.
So, the thought that I had to kind of be fair all around and make sure everyone's comfortable is to have a check drawn and Steve picks it up at the presentation.
Rick, have you spoken with him about it at all?
He reached out to me today and said he was presenting an invoice and he would appreciate if the board would consider approving it, and then the balance would be due upon the final final written report.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Board?
I'm okay with it.
We'll make a motion to forward the 1250 at our next meeting.
Our next meeting or the meeting on the 23rd?
I'm sorry, at the 23rd, forgive me, the 23rd. But I would like to have a more specific date as to when he foresees having this completed for us.
Let's try to get the outline and some feedback on the final report, and I'll try to ask Steve to either speak briefly at the next meeting or I'll report back to the board with a date.
That sounds good to me.
Thank you, Susan.
You're welcome. So I'll make a motion that we advance Steve Warner 1250. Present to him at
Rick seconded.
I'll second it.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Okay.
Thank you.
All right, we have no minutes to approve tonight. We have financial reports from the month ended September 30th, 2020. Has anyone reviewed that?
I've looked at it. It looks to be in order.
Would you like to make a motion?
I'll make a motion.
I'll second it.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Okay. We do have one thing under the report of the clerk, and that's the host community agreement. I wasn't aware that that was going to be there, to be honest with you. And personally, I don't think this is something we need to have a public conversation about every meeting at this point until we really have something to report. Does anybody?
I don't disagree.
I don't disagree either.
Okay, so we'll pass over that tonight.
I have one thing I'd like to just mention. A letter came in today to Francis from the DEC asking that if we wanted to continue the conditional shellfish program in the north end of Acabonic this winter. And they're asking for a response by, I believe it's the 30th. Well, I'm not sure, but it's the week after our next meeting, so we don't have to necessarily.
May I interrupt 1 second? I think the date is November 15th.
Okay.
They would like to have us respond.
Okay, but that's going to require somebody doing all the testing beforehand. If we have anyone willing to do that.
I don't think beforehand. I'm not completely sure about this, but I did speak to Zach about it a couple of weeks ago, and they have enough data to open it. They probably require some testing throughout the opening, which we did last year. And actually, they did quite a bit of it on their regular testing runs. We only had to do 2 or 3 runs.
So last year we had to establish a history first before they would do it, and now we're
we had to establish enough preliminary data, which was before the opening, to determine when it could be opened and under what rainfall conditions. And then we had to do some verification testing during the opening. And then just before the opening closed, the virus hit, and that stopped everything. But they feel they have enough data to reopen it. The letter did say they would require the town's assistance in doing, whatever testing is necessary through the program. I'm willing to do that. I think the real question is it worth opening? I don't think there was really any meaningful harvest out of that area last year. I can see going either way on this, but I don't know, what kind of an understanding the general public and the shellfish harvesters will have about us deciding not to continue it or to continue it. I think it's probably worth continuing.
I'd like to see it continue.
Yeah, I think
see
that's
no
a
reason
positive
not to.
step, John.
Yeah.
I'm in favor of it as well, especially since the letter was, talking about the pandemic and how the commercial fishing fishermen have been at a disadvantage. So I think it's something that would be nice to continue and have a stabilized feeling of normalcy. So I would be in favor of continuing the program. Should we make a motion, John? You want to make a motion?
I make a motion that we ask the clerk to respond positively to their
I
report.
will second that.
In favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Okay, we'll respond favorably.
Francis, I have something else I'd like to add as well before we wrap up.
Sure, Chris.
Just for all the trustees, as we know that, our authority under the Dongan patent does preempt state law, but with that in mind, we have historically and continue to make every effort to comply with the open meetings law, in order to provide transparency and to best serve the public. So with that in mind, I just want to make a reminder to the trustees regarding the email protocols that emails that go out, between all of the trustees and a quorum should be and only used for scheduling and organizational matters, and otherwise substantive conversations should either be done in less than quorum in the committees or ultimately do need to pan out, on this forum. So just a reminder, I think we've done a really nice job given, the protocols we have to adhere to under COVID-19, but we should try to keep that up and maintain that, under the open meetings law, to maintain that transparency. That's really all I have to say.
Thank you, Chris.
Okay.
Thanks for reminding us.
Yep.
Thank you. I have one last thing I would like to add to tonight's meeting. It's very short. The turtle rescue of the Hamptons has notified people who follow them that due to the warm weather this fall, turtles are still crossing the road. They're still seeking places for the cooler weather, but it has not occurred yet. So I've noticed that some of our green signs that we had up have disappeared. If you see green signs out, please let them remain there or take them home to use for next year. But the turtles are still out on the road due to the warm weather. So thank you.
And just following up on that, I spoke to Frank Cavedo the other day, and the mud turtle survey that we permitted him for last spring never materialized because of the virus. So if anybody was wondering where that stood, it still to take place at some future date.
Okay, good.
Anybody else?
Yeah, Francis, just one more thing. You do not have any callers. Thank you.
Great, thank you.
Thank you, Matt.
You're very welcome.
All right. Do I have a motion to adjourn?
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
A second.
There's all in favor?
Aye,
Aye.
thank you.
Okay, well, thank you again to LTV
Right.
and Matt Chapman. You got to do a great job, and it's much appreciated.
Well, thank
Thanks,
you, folks.
Matt.
Thank you.
Good night.
Have a
Okay.
lovely evening, everybody.
Yep.
Right.
Good night.
Bye.